Truth or no, we're not doing truth or dare with you guys. No effing way. I know better. Sorry, I had a message. I apologize. Not very professional. Welcome once again to the greatest podcast you've never heard of until now. We are Talk 80's to me. Copyright 2023, Steve Barrett Incorporated. I am your host, your mad host, the man who was born in the 60s, adolescent in the 70s, partied hard in the 80s, and cried in the 90s. And I'm still crying. And I'm here, though, talking once again about all things 80s, whether it's movies, TV shows, music, pop culture, trends and fashions, mullets, whatever the case may be. We discuss it on this show. And we had a great time last week with some special guests. And we're going to have a great time as well this week, as I am joined by some crazy, awesome guys. Two brothers from another mother. Actually, three brothers from another mother. I've known these three guys longer than pretty much anybody else in my life, and happy to have them with us. First of all, let's say hi to the sound guy, the board guy, computer guy, the everything guy, Ben McMillan. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, pretty good, Steve. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much for being here once again and for doing what you do. To my immediate right, man, the madman, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Greg Sell. From southwestern Pennsylvania, which is where we're all from, I guess, technically. Frontman, guitar player. Well, actually, you play keyboards. You play bass. Do you play drums, too? And he plays a mean skin flute as well. He is a legend in these parts. He's a great rock and roller. He's fun. He's awesome. He rocks. And he's in not one, not two, but, well, three bands, actually, right?
Yeah.
And all of these bands play their own respective tributes and dedication to the awesome era of the 80s. Greg Sell, everybody, welcome aboard. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And, of course, to my far right, an even crazier guy. This is a guy who, man, I've also gone through the trenches with in the 80s battlegrounds. This is a madman who I love dearly, like my own brother as well. He's crazy, but that's a good thing. And he's a rock and roller, and he has incredible, as does Greg, incredible knowledge in the topic we're going to talk about tonight, which is all things hair band, 80s hair metal. We're going to be doing it. But anyway, Brian Baumgartner, everybody. Say hello to Brian. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that, brother.
Glad to have you on board, man.
Thank you for having me.
I touched your nipple. I'm sorry.
Don't do that again.
I'm sorry.
The nice young.
Unless you have a dollar.
So last week, I just want to say real quick, last week we had our guest was Adam Jode, another musician, great guy, all around awesome, badass. He passed around what could only be described as bottled death. It was bottled insanity is what it was called. It was
Smelling salt.
Smelling salts if it was on crack in a bottle. And we took turns passing it around and sniffing it. And Ben will tell you, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that I almost died. It was pretty scary.
That's a little different.
I had to mute his microphone. He was hacking so bad.
That's a little different than what we used to pass around.
Yes.
I mean,
wait, what?
I did
what are you
not
talking
say
about?
that.
But so
Cigarettes when he smoked.
You know the gum ones.
Yeah.
When you blew real hard to smoke. Came
Listen,
out.
I said last week, I said I don't like cocaine. I just like the way it smells.
Oh my god.
So tonight we're going to do something a little different. Last week we talked about the movie that we did a featured movie of the week from the 80s, featured TV show from the 80s. We talked a little bit about different things. Tonight is one topic, one focus. Before we start though, Brian, I understand you brought something with you that last week it was bottle insanity. We got to pass this around. We have our fourth guest, right? And his name's Jimmy.
Uncle Jim.
Uncle Jim.
Uncle Jim. And we are having a traditional little taste of the Jim Beam whiskey.
Jim and I go way back.
Way, way back. You have to turn his mic off again.
Yeah. It's been a while since I went mouth to mouth with Uncle Jimmy. Woo!
You're welcome.
He's always there for you.
Tastes a
And
lot
good
more
times, I
DNA than alcohol in that one. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
The
Brother.
fourth man in line.
You wouldn't believe where my tongue was just before we started.
I think he kind of can imagine.
All right, let's talk 80s. More importantly, let's talk 80s hair bands. For those of you who don't know what the phrase hair band means, Greg, you want to explain it? I was like throwing you in the fire, man. Come on.
Dudes that play rock and roll music that look like chicks.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it, man. That you can't get much more clearer than that.
And the more you look like a chick, the more
Pretty
chicks
guys.
you got.
Yeah,
They were pretty guys that got pretty girls,
guys.
and they all had big hair.
I thought you were going to say something else under big.
You told me to keep it clean.
Somewhat clean-ish. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a great definition. Bands that just lived, breathed, and adopted the party lifestyle back in the 80s, which is where it all began. And started with big hair, and it continued on. But a lot of today, I like to think that over the years, especially since the 90s, when the grunge movement took over, I do want
the music died.
right, and yeah, it was literally the day the 80s music died when Nirvana's "Smells Like Teen Poop" came out, and a lot of people then from that point on, even to this day, still ridicule and make fun of the 80s. The hair band scene. Oh yeah, you know, the big hair and the makeup and the mascara and the whole thing. But people fail to realize or don't remember that there was some amazing musicians, songwriters, and singers that came out of that era. So we're going to talk about all that.
Life in general, then.
It was just a
think about
different time.
life in
Definitely.
general. Then
It was a good time.
National Record Mark going to get tickets,
Oh my God,
You know, I think
not ordering them online, not
Right.
texting your buddy. Go
Camelot for
with
me was
your
a big
buddy
one. Yeah,
to
well,
get
you know,
tickets.
it was a personal thing. It was a journey to go to a concert.
Yes.
You
Right.
get up early in the morning or the night before, stand in line outside of your favorite record store, waiting to go get that ticket in the morning. You know, it wasn't
hoping
a-
they had enough because
Right,
they
it
only
was
had
an
so
event.
many at each
yeah,
store. You
yeah.
know?
And you didn't know until you got up there when it
Yes.
was your turn. Oh, we
And
just
you
sold the
couldn't-
last
you
one.
couldn't
You son of a
text your
bitch.
buddy. You had to wait till you got home and say, "Dude, I got these tickets, man.
You had to
We're
wait to-
going."
to pick up the landline
Yes.
phone, you know, with the long cord and
Or
the
put a quarter in the payphone.
Yeah, yeah,
and you had to know their number.
yeah,
Not to
right.
sound like the old guy, get off my lawn, but
Well, no, we
get
are
off my
old.
lawn.
Let's be honest. We got about 200 years between the four of us right now. So,
Please
right?
don't put
I
it that
mean,
way.
freaking dinosaur era here, but it's okay. So let's talk a little bit about the beginning, if you will, the origins of the hair band scene.
I got it for you right here in the words of Dave Barrett, your brother.
Uh-huh.
Aerosmith, dude.
Aerosmith, dude. For those of you who, yeah, there's no other way.
You
My
gotta
brother
explain it.
Dave, older brother Dave, he is the biggest Aerosmith fanatic on the planet. Literally, hand to God, has seen them. I think now he's up to 40 times live. He's been obsessed with them his whole life. But yeah,
That's a huge beginning for hair metal.
absolutely. So
Steven Tyler's got the scarves. He's got the persona. That's
Steven
where-
Tyler.
For me, that's where it begins.
Right. I would agree with that. I think a combination of that and David Lee Roth, what he was doing in early Van Halen, I think that was a big influence as well. Because Vince Neil, literally from Motley Crue lead singer, came out and said that everything he did on stage he got from David Lee.
Absolutely.
So I think the combination of the two, Aerosmith and Van Halen, really kicked off that whole era. There were other bands that were doing it too. Quiet Riot was actually formed in the mid '70s. Twisted Sister was formed in the early
You
'70s.
got to credit Kiss with the pyrotechnics. on
Yeah,
stage
with the show,
you
you
know,
know.
which was a big part of the '80s and going to concerts.
Kiss with the show. You're right. That
Yeah,
was huge.
absolutely.
And then there were go ahead.
Other bands, you got to think Bowie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the
You gotta
fashion
think with
styles and the
fashion,
makeup, and absolutely.
the New York Dolls.
New York Dolls.
That
Oh,
kind
my
of
goodness,
stuff.
yes.
And there were bands like Sweet. And there were bands that might not have looked
Slade.
Slade, right? There were bands that might not have looked like that, but they had the sound. They had that party mentality. Because Ben and I have talked 100 times, especially recently, a lot about how really the 70s changed everything as far as music goes. And, at a time when the 50s and 60s was starting to become stale and everything started kind of sounding the same, and with Vietnam and the drug movement and the women's movement and the sexual freedom, sexual revolution.
Distortion.
Yeah. I mean,
that's when it started.
It was Black Sabbath. It was Steppenwolf actually created coined the term heavy metal. That was where it first came out. And Heavy Metal Thunder actually was in that Born to Be Wild. So, would there be 80s hair band without the 70s? Probably not.
No, that was
it would
definitely
be
the transition between the 60s and the 80s.
Sure.
All that 70s music,
I think your guitar gods started in the 70s.
Oh.
That's what really bleeded off into the 80s.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Jimmy Page.
You think about Ted Nugent. You think about, Eddie Van Halen, obviously. There were a lot of guys back then. So, interestingly, in the early 80s, there were two major music scenes that kind of happened at the same time that invaded America. And the first was the new wave of British heavy metal, right? You had Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, of course. But you had all the, Deep Purple and the Scorpions, and they were starting to make real powerful inroads. And then you had the LA scene, which was still doing that party metal, fun, just party till you puke, drink and do drugs kind of mentality. So it was kind of an explosion that the 80s metal scene became huge, both commercially as far as radio, but as far as like fashion trends and styles and everything else. I mean, I remember being in high school. My God, I'm dating myself here. In 1982, I was in high school.
Wow.
And everybody flipping out about Def Leppard's debut album.
Right.
On Through the Night, or is it High and Dry? One of them.
Somebody Google it.
Right. And, if only there was a podcast that was about the 80s that could Google that stuff. But anyway.
Where's our fact checker?
He passed out from the Jimmy Beam. But anyway.
Why did she put her shirt back on?
Right. So Def Leppard was huge. And then it became this weird, it was like out of nowhere. And actually, Brian and I were talking about this right before the show started. It was exactly 40 years ago last week, March 11th, 1983. Metal Health, Quiet Riot's album came out. And it was the first American metal band to reach number one in the singles with Come On Feel the Noise.
That was a rockin' album.
It was amazing.
Was
it
really
literally shot out like a cannon. It was a blast of fresh air. People were just like, what is this? And it invaded them radio waves. And it became huge. And then other bands started kind of falling in line too. Motley Crue's debut album was in 1981, Too Fast for Love, or as I like to call it now, Too Fat for Love. But Vince Neil.
Vince Neil.
Yeah.
Vince Neil.
Meal.
Singing about cheese curls, curls, curls.
No, singing every other word to the song.
Yeah, singing every other word. Yeah. Hoagie, sweet hoagie, the whole thing.
Sweet hoagie.
But anyway, 1981, Vince Neil was a slim, slender rock and roll badass with peroxide blonde hair. Too Fast for Love came out, and honestly, America didn't know what the hell to make of this band. They were doing stuff that, musically, no one had done before at that point. They were mixing punk with glitter glam, with pop and cowbell and weird guitar sounds and everything else. It was a train wreck. It was a garbage can, a mixture of sounds and influences, and for some reason it worked, and they exploded as well. Ozzy coming in solo after being dumped from Black Sabbath, coming out with the Blizzard of Oz. Huge hit, Crazy Train, of course. Getting into a lot of controversy with Suicide Solution at the time. Right. Big hit single. Their parents tried to sue Ozzy because they claimed that the Suicide Solution was a song about suicide, and that their children died after listening to the song. But Ozzy came out and said, no, it's about alcohol. It's a solution. It's a, you know, it nearly killed me. But anyway, Scorpions with Rocky Like a Hurricane, huge mainstream hit. And then, you know, even Van Halen, which at that point people were starting to kind of think like, you know, Van Halen's getting kind of pushed to the side from his new and exciting bands. So they altered their sound and come out with 1984 with Jump and Panama and Hot
Great
for
album.
Teacher, right? So they reinvented themselves.
The reincarnation of Whitesnake.
Whitesnake, right? Absolutely. Coverdale at this point was still a couple years away from putting together the super group that would come out in 1987 with Still of a Night, but he was making roads at that point with Slow and Easy, which is still considered one of the greatest metal songs of the 80s, you know, to come out at that time. But so you started seeing these bands, and I thought this was interesting that so Quiet Riot, Metal Health came out March 11, 1983. Motley Crue, Too Fast for Love, November 81. Wasp, the debut album of Wasp, August of 1984. Rat, Out of a Cellar, debut 1984. Then Motley Crue actually followed up Too Fast for Love with Shout of a Devil in September of 83. Dokken with Tooth and Nail in 1984. Autograph with a huge hit, Turn Up the Radio in 1984. And Def Leppard Pyromania following up their debut, actually, with Pyromania in 1983. Pyromania was huge.
Yes.
I mean, Photograph and what's that? Globin,
Rock of Ages.
And then,
Rock of Ages.
Immediately everybody in school had a Def
So,
Leppard shirt.
Blackie Lawless question for Steve Barrett.
Oh, my goodness,
The
here
man
we
that
go.
loves Wasp.
Yes.
What band did he play in before Wasp?
Well, he was actually in a band called Sister. And he actually, for a very brief stint, was in the New York Dolls.
One more
I don't know.
in the 80s.
In the 80s. Well, wait. No, I don't know the answer to this. I thought he went straight from Sister to Wasp.
London.
Oh, London with
Yes.
Lizzie Gray, the guitar. No, I don't know who the guitar player
And
was.
who else in London?
Nikki Sixx was in that
Yes.
band. I forgot about London. Damn it.
I knew I'd get you on that one. I had to stump you on one.
And
That was it.
And I have much heterosexual love for Blackie Lawless, as you guys know on the panel.
I think I was there when you almost touched him one night.
I almost touched him.
You were in the front row.
I was in the front row.
M3.
Yeah, M3 Festival in Maryland. Wasp was the headliner on the first night. Kix opened up. Hell of a great first night. Kix was another band, early 80s, that was making inroads, too. They were more AC/DC rock and roll.
And still to this day, put on an amazing show.
One of the most phenomenal live bands I've ever seen,
that
and
guy
continue.
has so much energy, and he weighs
Oh, my
80
goodness.
pounds.
Oh,
He's unbelievable.
Steve
soaking
Whiteman.
wet.
Lead singer for
Maryland
Kix.
band.
Yeah, they're from
Yeah.
Maryland. They're all in their 60s. A couple band members are in their 70s, and they're still rocking it, man. It's
Drummer's finally calling it quits. He's had some help.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Brian Brain Damage, I think that's his name.
Well,
Brian
Forsyth.
that's unfortunate.
Damage Forsyth.
Yeah,
But
imagine
you know,
that, a guy named Brian having brain damage.
I mean, being a local band, just recently we went to see them at a local club, and man, I tell you what, it just blew us away.
so sold out.
Sold out
it
show,
was a club,
sold out every
but
time.
sold out, and they sell out every time.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were wiped out when they were done. They had they soaked up everybody's energy in that audience, and we were all just.
And I've seen them so many times, and it's the same every
Oh
time.
yeah,
The energy
They
doesn't
never. It seems
stop.
like they never have a bad night.
Full
and,
throttle.
and they just sound really good. all
For
the
those of
time.
you who might be confused, we're not saying Kiss.
No,
We're saying Kix, as in
With
the
an X.
cereal.
Blow my
Kix. Kids like Kix for what Kix has got. Mom like Kix for what Kix has not. I believe that's what they said back in the day.
yes,
KIX, great band. If you haven't ever heard them, check them out. They are pretty amazing. But they were more of a rootsy, AC/DC, bluesy based rock and roll band. They never really fit, I don't think, into the quote unquote hair band. But they got lumped into that, which is something I want to talk to you guys about. But anyway, so that origins, so we're up to 85. And I think that the hair band scene still hadn't found its way yet. I think it was still, bands were experimenting with different styles of sounds. But it was around the mid 80s when the personalities started coming out of the bands. We started learning more and more about the quote unquote guitar gods.
Yes.
And the singers, and you think about guys like back in the day. I mean, Rob Halford of Judas Priest and Iron Maiden with Bruce Dickinson, even though they weren't hair bands, but they had actually experimented with the hair band thing that didn't do too well for those guys.
They all had their moments.
Yeah, every band at some point in the 80s, no matter how heavy they were, that tried to tease their hair and get commercial.
I mean, is that Eddie in a pair of spandex?
Yes,
I think I just seen Eddie in a pair of spandex.
Rob Halford teased what little hair he had left on the Turbo album.
He did.
I'm your Turbo lover, right?
I heard it. That's not all he teased.
But where's the love for the bass players?
You're absolutely right, by the way.
Talk about getting shunned.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the bass players. I mean, you got Rudy Sarzo that everybody knows.
Right.
But if you look at some of the other bands, the bass player, you can't say their name because it was always
You're right.
Warren DeMartini.
Right.
You know what I mean? It wasn't Juan Cruzier or whatever. his name
Juan
is.
Cruzier from Rat.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Those guys, you didn't know them.
Nikki
Bass players
Sixx
got no love.
You're right. Nikki Sixx was well known, but more because of him snorting ants and lapping up Ozzy's pee than his actual bass playing.
How many girls can we get with without getting a shower?
Right.
Which is one of my favorites.
And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. But, man, we started hearing about guys like George Lynch. What's his name from the Scorpions, for God's sakes? He's a phenomenal, whose name just escapes me.
Rudolph.
Schenker. A lot of these guitar gods and personalities. I remember magazines like Circus Magazine and Hit Parader, and almost every month, whenever the magazine, it was either a guitar god or it was the lead singer. Yeah. I mean, the drummers and bass players very rarely got the love.
John Sykes,
another great guitar player who happened to put together a great band of his own that didn't do too well. Blue Murder was amazing. Okay, so anyway, it was. So around that 85, Motley Crue had come out at this point with Home Sweet Home, very glammy, the Theater of Pain album. We're starting to see them they went from garish goth and Shout at the Devil, the Pentagram and everything, to very frilly pink and purple and sequined.
But don't you think that was the industry taking over? Because the power ballads were really starting to take off.
Absolutely.
And industry comes and says, hey, you guys are starting to fade away a little bit. You need a slow song. It's got to be a good one.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's no doubt that the hair band phenomenon was the result of record labels telling these bands. I mean, Rob Halford from Priest came out and said, we went from defenders of the faith and screaming for vengeance to our record label saying, you guys aren't doing hits. We need hits. We need you to wear glammy stuff and come out with Turbo Lover. Which, by the way, once we found out more about Rob Halford in the later days, we understood what Turbo Lover was about, right?
And we understood all the leather.
And, heading out to the highway had a different meaning.
he was a biker, right? That's why he was.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, breaking the law.
Exactly.
Like on Police Academy bikers.
Right. Heading out to Hershey, heading out to the highway. Sorry.
Wow.
We went there.
We went there.
Sorry,
No,
Greg.
you went there.
Sorry, Greg, you're in the middle.
I went there. I apologize. Screaming for vengeance. My favorite one was You Got Another Thing Coming.
Yes. Yes, you do.
Another thing. But anyway, but it was in 1986 when, in my opinion, the real birth, the explosion was when, in June of 1986, 4 guys from Harrisburg moved out to L.A., put on the most makeup any band has ever done, the most women's clothes. They looked hot as hell on their debut album. I remember in Fisher's Big Wheel picking up their debut album and going, man, I'd like to do the nasty with her. What's her name? Brett. Right? We're talking about Poison. Look what the cat dragged in. Incredibly enough, that album was not a huge hit at all at first. It took a very long time. They released Cry Tough. It didn't do anything. They released I Won't Forget You. It didn't do anything. And then, in a last-ditch effort, the song that Brett didn't even want originally on the album, the record label Capitol said we'll try one more single, and that single was, Ben.
Oh, I have no idea.
What's the show called?
I'm the wrong person to.
What's the show called?
Okay, Talk Dirty to Me.
Ah, you got it.
Oh, yeah.
So they released Talk Dirty to Me in 1986, or actually in 87 at this point, and man, the floodgates opened. And all of a sudden, all these other bands started getting signed, and soon you started hearing bands like LA Guns. You started hearing about bands who putting on makeup and getting real frilly and everything else. There became an explosion of what was really called glam metal at the time. And it became very, very big, very popular. But in 1986, that happened. In 1987, Poison exploded. But it was the summer of 87 when Guns N' Roses released Appetite for Destruction. And for some reason, Guns N' Roses got lumped in with the hair bands.
Yeah.
And it might have been because I remember the first single, Welcome to the Jungle, they had teased
Yeah,
hair.
come on, rolling out of the tour bus, giant hair,
Yeah.
leather.
Axl
tight,
was wearing makeup and had really teased up hair. But what the incredible success of Appetite, what that did was that opened up even more bands to be signed out of L.A., which was Faster Pussycat, a lot of more blues-based bands. Cinderella became huge at this point. And then we saw Whitesnake. David Coverdale put together the super group of musicians and came out with Still of a Night. And all of a sudden, man, it just took over. It took over MTV, took over the Billboard charts. It was nuts.
Dude, I would not go to sleep until Headbangers Ball was over.
And every Saturday night on MTV, Headbangers Ball
Just
started at
wouldn't do it.
midnight. And they would always and you had not like today. You were talking about how we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have anything.
No.
You had to wait till Saturday
Yes.
night and hope that they would debut or the
And
the
if
new
you were lucky, you had
video.
a VCR where you could record it
Yep.
and watch it back if you fell asleep.
Absolutely.
If you were lucky.
And then
A
you
lot of
would
people
go
didn't
to a
have it.
friend's house
Yeah.
sometimes because you didn't have a VCR, but you knew they did. And
Yeah.
you, oh my God, we're gonna go over and get to watch the new
Yes.
Girls video.
World premiere.
Right? And they had MTV Headbangers Ball was also an interesting story in and of itself because they had a lot of weird different hosts before they finally settled in with the legend Ricky Rockman.
Right.
But yeah, man, that was a pipital show and that was
Oh my
important.
goodness. Well, I mean, that's really where you got your music from back then,
Right.
Because I mean, like you said, we didn't have the cell phones and the streaming music and everything like that. You sat and watched Headbangers Ball, and you're like, well, who's this new band? Who's XYZ? I never heard of them before.
Right,
You know,
right.
When you would sit there with your finger on the record button and the radio station would play your favorite
Oh
song.
yeah, the mixtapes, baby.
And at the end, it
Mixtapes.
would cut off before the song was over, and you'd hear a commercial, and you'd get all mad. Yeah, and you
Right.
thought you were cool with your jam box, and
Oh,
you're
absolutely.
jamming, and then all of a sudden the radio ad comes on, and like
my goodness.
lame.
Yeah, and then the boombox that took 36 D
batteries.
batteries, right? It weighed like 100 pounds. You know, like
and I think all of us have a shoulder that leans one way or
Oh,
the
yeah.
other because of that.
chiropractors made a crap load of money back then too. But yeah, I remember being mad, like you said, like they'd be playing a great song, and right before the song would end, they'd be like, Preparation H hemorrhoid cream. And you're like, you bastards. So, but yeah, so radio started picking up on it. Record labels were making a stunning amount of money. And all of a sudden it just took over everything. And movies started coming out that were, the documentary, Decline of Western Civilization 2, The Metal Years,
the
amazing.
classic.
Have
Amazing,
not
right?
seen it.
And I mean, it literally infiltrated everything. Motley Crue was the #1 band. They couldn't do any wrong. I mean, Theater of Pain was not a good album overall. Maybe 2 songs that were worth the rest of it's filler because they were so high on dope.
Right.
And Girls had what? Girls and Wild Side, right? And the rest of it was garbage. And
They
they
started
were
losing me then.
yeah,
It's kind of like
heavily
nah.
into drugs at this point. Drugs were starting to take its toll on a lot of these bands.
Yeah,
But it didn't matter. 87, 88, 89, man. The floodgates open. Poison comes out with Open Up and Say Ah, which produced, I think, 5 massive hit singles. These guys couldn't do anything wrong. I mean, Faster Pussycat was big. At first, they came out with a self-titled album and did Bathroom Wall, Don't Change That Song. And then they released their second album in 89 with House of Pain. But then something happened. And it was in the late 80s when, we talked a little bit about this already, the power ballad. And it started becoming scary how every band had to have a power ballad.
Yes.
Yeah.
No matter how heavy they were, no matter how different they were, record labels and radio stations started insisting that all these bands started making and releasing, most of them, unfortunately, cheesy, schmaltzy power ballads.
Sure, look at Skid Row, how it changed them.
Yeah,
They were a
absolutely.
heavier band until the ballads came, and then they kind of went.
Skid Row was an angry New Jersey band full of young punks who loved punk music, but they got a taste of the big time thanks to John Bon Jovi himself and 18 in Life. And I Remember You became their biggest hits.
I'm not going to lie. Bon Jovi, Skid Row, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Skid Row got off the stage. Bon Jovi did one song, and we were out in the parking lot.
Yeah,
It was just like, this
I agree
is
with
two
that. I mean,
different,
I
two
believe
different
that.
bands all together. What's going on? We weren't smart enough to stay for the girls.
Right.
So when we were out in the parking lot, we went.
Well, that reminds me of a time that I went to. Guns N' Roses was not even out for. Appetite was not even out for 6 months, and a whole bunch of people, Kevin and Jack. I won't say last names here, but anyway, you know these guys. But we all piled into a van and went to see Guns N' Roses open up for Aerosmith. And Guns N' Roses played for 40 minutes, and right after they were done, the driver and everybody else in my group went, "Okay, we're going home." So I never got to see Aerosmith. And I was like, "What? We just came all the way up here for a 40-minute set." But Guns was incredible. But anyway, so the power ballad, it really started leading towards the credibility being lost on a lot of these talented heavy metal bands. Everybody was doing it. Even Wasp, which was considered one of the heaviest hair bands, commercial bands, they did Forever Free. Motley Crue, of course, with Home Sweet Home, and then they did, Without You. Every band. And then
It was definitely a
bands,
floodgate.
new bands started coming out in the late 80s that they were brand new, and all they did was put out like a power ballad, And then,
Steelheart.
yeah,
Steelheart.
I'll Never Let You Go. And then you had bands like Mr. Big who were floundering, around for a while, not doing anything. And then To Be With You came on. I know you know that song, Ben.
Yes.
You knew that song.
Yes.
He's humming it in his head right now.
Hold on, little girl. Right? And then Extreme, floundering around for years, not doing anything really, not having much success. And they came out with,
Why do you keep looking at me?
because I know you know the song, More Than Words.
I do know the song.
Of course you do. Everybody that's not metal knows those songs. And that was the point.
Me and my extreme shirt.
Yeah, right.
Come on, ladies.
I am here to run the computer, by the way.
House of Pain, Faster Pussycat, they all became, it was one after another. And then it just got to the point where MTV, Headbangers Ball was all ballads. And then the radio was all
Ballad of
ballads.
Jane.
Ballad of Jane, LA Guns, which is a great song, by the way. And then a lot of them started getting cheesy and schmaltzy. Whitesnake, Is This Love? Van Halen with Hagar had a second life career out of cheesy, schmaltzy ballads. When It's Love and
Why Can't This Be Love?
Why Can't This Be Love and Everything About Love and whatever. So it went from being about aggression and attitude and punk rock feelings to prom themes and 16 or high school dances, and it was brutal, man.
I think I went from the time when just prior to that, the bands were scaring the hell out of your mother.
Oh, right.
So your mother was singing the songs because the ballads were out and they liked them, and that kind of started to lose us at that point. If you're not scaring the hell out of your parents, then why are we listening to it?
And we're back. We apologize that I had to take a big poopy. And
I was Googling Taylor Swift vacation photos, and I clicked the wrong button. So.
Yes.
no, he looked up buttholes.
TSBH.
He looked up buttholes.com, and then he got really intrigued.
Yes.
He looked up buttholes.com, and there was a picture of himself on there. That was weird. Anyway, going into 89, though, the contradictory side of that was that there were some newer bands that were coming up that were making some inroads. I would be remiss, by the way, we're talking hair bands. We've talked about a lot of different bands. I just checked my notes during Ben's poop, and it occurred to me
I'm editing this, right? I'm going to totally change that.
It occurred to me that we didn't really talk about Bon Jovi's impact on the hair bands era, right? I mean, you want to talk about prom themes and big hits and
made a career of it.
But it was because they got the girls.
Yes.
You know what
That's
I mean?
it.
It was a cult female following.
right.
And you notice it was all of us guys standing around complaining about Bon Jovi.
Oh yeah,
But
absolutely.
it was just us guys.
See, think of the irony behind
So
this,
dumb.
right?
How'd that work out for you?
Not so well. Like,
Think of
man,
the-
wait a minute. I love Bon Jovi.
Right. Well, there was a point where I would do them, but anyway,
Well, yeah.
there was.
to get
So
to the
think
chicks.
of the irony here. So guys didn't like a lot of hair bands because they looked like girls. But who were the hair band's biggest audience? The hot chicks.
hot chicks.
Yeah, but the normal guys that didn't look like girls weren't getting the girls.
Right. Good point.
Which is why I tried my best.
Which is why God
That
blessed
entails the mullet.
God, right? And God blessed the malls.
Oh my
The
gosh!
malls
Yes.
were great. What a great place to meet chicks.
Putting on my leather pants and I'm going to the mall.
They're going to the mall. We're going to hang out around Camelot Records, or
Yeah,
they
the
didn't
record-
have
the record
Spencer's back then.
store.
Yeah,
record
the record
store.
store was the place to be, and you could pretty much pick up any skank with a 6-foot hairdo, you know,
and lace gloves.
and a denim skirt.
Yes,
right?
sir.
That those are big.
Stop it.
And the bobby socks. Stop me when I go too far.
No, you're not.
Aquanet.
Keep going.
Aquanet.
I can still smell it. God love it. And white rain.
So yeah, malls.
Gotta have the right rain.
White Rain.
Like,
Oh my God.
that
I
White
forgot
Rain?
about White Rain.
Oh,
I
I never
remember
forgot about White
stealing
Rain.
my mom's White Rain cans, aerosol
Here
cans.
comes the story.
It was no.
Yes.
We're not going to tell stories.
There
But
I
anyway,
was.
and then so there's another band that I should mention too that made a huge impact on the hair band scene with just one song, and it's a song that's still being heard in arenas around the world at just about every sporting event. Ready? Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. Remember that song, Ben?
I kind of seem to remember somebody playing
bit,
that
yeah.
one time.
The final
5, 10.
countdown.
By Europe, which, by the way, had another really good guitar player, John Norm. But my God, Joey Tempest, right?
He still sings.
He's still
well.
singing,
Yeah.
absolutely. The final countdown was huge too. Okay,
Yeah,
so anyway,
big time.
late '80s, we started seeing this influx of newer bands, younger bands that were taking what was already before and kind of doing their own thing. We got to mention a great band. Greg mentioned during Ben's poop that the Bullet Boys really made an impact on MTV with "Smooth Up In Ya." And another band, actually, that came from Philadelphia. Was Brittany Fox, that was doing some cool things with Girl School and Long Way to Love. And so we saw this, even though the power ballad was still a thing. And I have to mention, Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood came out in '89, only the biggest hair band album. We got to mention Def Leppard too, with Hysteria.
Definitely. Hysteria.
And that came out in '87. But so we're talking late '80s. Def Leppard was still huge. They put out like 7 singles off that horrible Hysteria album. Do you agree?
Yes,
It was a terrible album. Do you agree,
I do agree with that.
Brian?
Yeah, I do. I do.
I really believe
Although
to
I'm
this
not getting in
day
trouble
that
for saying that.
pretty soon we're going to be talking about the death of hair band. And I will say that I think Pour Some Sugar on Me was one of the nails in the coffin. But Motley Crue did revitalize the scene again in '89 when they got clean, they got sober, and then they put out Dr. Feelgood, which was their biggest selling album to date. Huge record for them. So going into '90, I think overall the hair metal scene was looking pretty decent.
Got a shout out to White Lion.
White Lion was also another big one with Wait and When the Children Cry.
That went nowhere after that.
No,
Vito
No, they
is
died.
still in hibernation. He
Yeah.
hasn't played since.
I think he's a woman now.
No, he was just on Eddie Trunk the other day.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
Not there's anything wrong with a man turning into a woman. Not at all.
Steven Tyler.
Hey, when's the last time you dressed in drag, Brian?
Right before I got here. I took it off for the camera, baby.
Yeah. I know. I know Greg's answer, so we're not going to get into that.
Still got half of it on. What are you talking about?
I
can't
asked
stand
you
at
if
the
you
table.
wanted me to bring my wig.
I know. We will do that in a future episode.
We are
by
so
the way.
doing it.
We're all going to dress up as our '80s alter ego counterparts. But anyway,
And then we're going to talk nothing 80s. Just sit here with those on.
yeah, we're going to talk about
Drink
our favorite.
vodka like Chris Holmes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Yeah, that was... So Wasp, thank you. Headless Children came out in '89, a great album, probably their best album to date. That came out in '89 too. They had some nice singles off of that as well. So going into '90, it was healthy. Bands were still on the charts. Def Leppard was still riding out that god awful "Pour Some Sugar on Me." Motley Crue was still killing it with, I think, 5 or 6 singles off of that one. "Don't Go Away Mad," "Just Go Away," same old situation.
That was a good album.
It was.
That was a good
And
album.
then when we saw in the early '90s, we saw newer bands, even still, bands like Trickster, kind of carrying the Firehouse, carrying the hairband banner. Slaughter.
Warrant,
right? Big hits all across the board. It was, while the old guys were still killing it, most of them, the newer guys were kind of coming up their own. Rat was still putting out stuff. I mean, these bands were still doing it. So I felt good. I remember being in college in the early '90s, and we had a metal show and it was, I mean, we had record labels that was sending us stuff. Badlands was another great early '90s, right? Ray Gillen, rest in peace. And Jakey Lee, of course, another guitar god. Ozzy was still relevant. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the early '90s having that metal show, and the record companies were still sending us albums and CDs, of course, started becoming more of a norm.
For you, that kids, that's a big CD made out of vinyl. Put it on a player, run around with it.
Actually, vinyl's making a huge comeback.
It is making a huge
which
comeback.
is interesting. But then, and then this is my opinion, just an opinion, Ben.
Oh my goodness.
Ben doesn't like it when I try to pass off my opinions as
Stop
facts.
trying to trigger me.
Right. So, but it was out of nowhere, seemingly overnight, the door closed on the hairband genre. And it was 1992-ish, I think, maybe 92, when Nirvana released their... Now, Nirvana was out in the 80s, actually. Right. They had put out a couple albums doing their alternative thing. Obviously, it wasn't going well. Soundgarden was around back then, too. At the late 80s, there came this push for something different. And it didn't really make any major headway, but they were there. And bands with a different style, different sound, bands who wanted to sing sad, depressing songs about how much they hate life. They were trying to make more of an impact, but we were still feeling good, right? The late 80s, we were still partying, man. We were still riding and rocking the Reagan wave, right? Yes. And then his buddy Bush continued that, and it was great. Cocaine and greed is cocaine and Bush.
He said Bush.
Or lack thereof by that time.
I meant
which
George
was awesome.
Bush. Come on now.
Oh, sorry.
Get your mind out of the gutter. Right? And then, oh my God, you made me lose track. Thanks, guys.
TSBH.
Yeah. We're not doing that now. But yeah, so we were still riding the rockin' wave. I mean, life was good. Greed was good. Remember Wall Street, Gordon Gekko? Isn't it Gordon? Michael Douglas from Wall Street. But anyway, he came out with the greed is good thing, and everybody was making money. Capitalism was at an all-time high. Whew. And then, man, Nirvana came out right about the same time that the Gulf War hit. Right? And America was kind of not feeling so happy anymore. A lot of our soldiers were dying, getting killed and stuff, and things were happening in the world that weren't so great. I mean, things were crappy were happening in the 80s, but we were riding this. Everybody was still so high and happy that, it didn't seem to really take much precedence. But with the Gulf War and with a lot of stuff coming out, man, and then Nirvana just releases Smells Like Teen Spirit. And almost overnight, man, I think there was a combination, a perfect storm of people getting tired of the power ballads, people getting tired of the party scene, and people wanted more reality, more realism with their music and their movies. This is when Silence of the Lambs was an Academy Award winner. Dark, grim stuff was making their way into the theaters. People wanted a major change, and I think whether Kurt Cobain meant it to be or not, I think "Smells Like Teen Spirit" became the soundtrack song for the change.
Yeah, definitely.
Agreed.
So let me ask you guys. I mean, what's your opinion on what killed 80s metal? What killed that first round, the big booming success of the 80s hair metal era? because it literally closed the door overnight, and suddenly record labels and bands, producers,
See, I
didn't want to
think-
have anything to do with that music.
I think that Nirvana had a lot to do with it, but I also think those successful bands were living that party lifestyle for so long that it started to take its toll on their music.
Right.
So people started to lose interest at that point. And then Nirvana comes along, and some of those bands really, really weren't grunge.
Right.
You look at Alice in Chains, that's a rocking band.
Yeah,
Stone
they're-
Temple Pilots, that kind of vibe is just crazy. So I think the cultural change, the bag phone. You know, think about that. How
Did
that
you ever have a
changes
bag
things.
phone, Ben?
I did.
I got on right after the bag phone.
Okay.
No, I had a bag phone.
Oh,
Did you?
yes,
Oh,
definitely.
absolutely. It was the best cell phone I ever had because you got coverage everywhere. It had a great antenna.
And you
If
got the
anybody-
poop in the bag too when you were
It was the
done.
bag phone. It
And if
looked
anybody
cool.
tried to take it,
It
you could
looked
beat
cool
them
in
with
my
it.
Camaro.
How'd that work out for you, Greg?
Great. Oh, the Camaro? No,
Yes,
I about died in that. Not too well.
In 1985, I had a Camaro and a sweet, sweet mullet with the T's, the Camaro with the T's, of course,
of
T-tops,
course.
and a sweet, sweet mullet and a rocking, a cassette deck system.
Oh, yeah.
Panasonic.
Did you have
No, it was a
louvers?
Panasonic.
Louvers.
Well, I might have.
On your
yeah.
Camaro? Did you
Yeah.
have louvers?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I was a badass, man. It was awesome.
Trying to talk every girl in the town and rolling around on your
Yes.
I pull into Margaret Bell Miller Middle School parking lot and be like, wait, I meant Waynesboro College.
hood. Yes, no.
And be like, how you doing?
Hello, ladies.
Yeah. But anyway,
But you think about that. You think about how the culture really started to change then. Everything was different. It wasn't cool to have the long hair anymore.
Right.
Everybody cut their hair. Well, it's kind of hard to put on the makeup and all that stuff when you have short hair because then you look like a crossdresser instead of a cool guy.
right?
You know what I mean? So I don't really blame that music. I think it was the culture itself. Those guys that were writing the grunge were pissed off.
Yeah.
And they would hurt you. If you called their music grunge or whatever, they would fight. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, it was just a different kind of genre coming in altogether. And at that time, we were pretty much due for a change. I mean, we rode that wave from 83
It was
to
a long
90.
wave, man. It was a long wave. I
And
mean,
a
admittedly.
great time, best times of our lives.
Right.
But
Well, and that younger. Oh, by the way, Brian, I didn't mean to not.
No,
I
no,
asked
no,
you both.
please.
But go ahead. I mean, so what's your thought on this?
I mean, I think it
the
was
demise
just,
of hairband.
I think it's the same as it always has been. You go from the 50 eras music to the 60s. And everybody rode the 60s wave for a while. Then it went to the 70s, and it kind of led into the 80s. And I think it was just another, change of the culture, change
Sure.
of the people.
We went from the 70s. We went from psychedelic to disco,
Right.
and then to metal, and then
And honestly, this is going to sound horrible, but all the big bands started getting sober.
yeah.
And I mean, who really wants a sober 80s band? I mean, I just don't. That's when I kind of went, oh man, what is happening?
that's what I say. When it changed like that, you think about it. That's when they stopped doing the drugs.
Yeah.
That's when they stopped
Yeah.
It is,
partying
absolutely.
hard. That's when that cultural change happened, and it wasn't there anymore.
Well, and I remember too very vividly being in the early 90s too. Like the stock market was crashing, having problems. The housing market was bad. All of a sudden, that Reagan era of spend, money, it was going out the window. People were like, "Wait a minute, we're losing jobs. We don't have, we can't party anymore."
Right, yeah.
And not to mention the fact that era, that generation of
I didn't quit partying, did you? We must have missed that.
Well, somebody didn't tell me to quit partying.
I mean,
how
some
many
of
years
us-
later is it?
some of us
The
continue
90s
partying.
were hard on me.
Yeah, the 90s were not a fun era for me either. I mean, it was fun,
Oh,
except for the hangovers and stuff. But yeah, the Boone's Farm hangovers were the worst.
That was,
But
that was your fault.
but no, so everything changed, like you said. So I think the people were like, I don't want to sing about cherry pie, and don't treat me bad, and give it to me good, and we got some serious problems out here. Racism was becoming an issue, the whole thing. I mean, it was just, like you said, things changed. And I think Nirvana just happened to be it. I believe if it wasn't them, it would have been somebody else eventually.
Oh, absolutely.
But
I mean,
look-
somebody
But
would
look
have.
how it's come full swingo.
Yeah.
They just had the stadium tour and made millions of dollars and
Okay.
sold out how many stadiums?
We're going to get to that in a second.
Think about that.
So, okay, so now we're at the point, and I know we've been talking for a while. Maybe this should be a two-parter or something, but we're now at the point where I think the 90s, we can all agree, it was like, man, this sucks. The music scene sucked. I mean, as a whole, bands weren't fun anymore. My opinion, not a fact. A lot of those guys couldn't really play. I mean, you got a lot of crappy bands with that knew three chords wearing flannel and staring down at the floor and not
no
moving.
Guitar Heroes
right.
whatsoever.
I mean, it wasn't about the show. It wasn't about the performance. It was about, I hate myself and I want to die. You know, that kind of.
I'm just saying, in the 90s, I was still driving by him, playing my hairband.
Oh, absolutely. I never
in
quit.
flannel.
Right. And then became this weird thing where 80s bands tried, and this was bad, when they tried to stay relevant and come out with their own grunge flavored records. Motley Crue put out their album with John Corabi. That was terrible. Warrant, of all bands, came out with a ultraphobic album. It was called. It was all very dark and grungy, and it fizzled out like a bad fart in church. So yeah, there was just the 80 bands were screwed. If they kept doing what they were doing, everybody's going to laugh at them. But if they tried to change, everybody called them posers. You know, because they were just trying to ride the wave. So it was bleak for a while for 80s hair band fans. But then came the revival, if you will. And I believe, my opinion, that Poison, of all bands, started the revival in the late 90s, early 2000s. They said, you know what? Let's reform, right? Because CC was out for a while, and then they had a couple other guys and blah, 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 whatever. And they said, let's reform. Let's bring some other bands with us. And let's go on a crazy little fun, you know, like a revival tour. And one of the first concerts I remember seeing that was 80s hair bands in the late 90s, early 2000s was Poison. It was four bands. It was like Cinderella, Faster Pussycat, Dawkins, and Poison or whatever. And to everyone's surprise, including the bands themselves, they had big crowds. People were coming out. It was summertime.
Oh, yeah. You got to remember those people from that era are now older. They have money. They're successful.
Yeah.
They don't care about spending money to go see that because they want to relive those days.
Right.
I mean, we do it every weekend.
Yeah. Right. We haven't stopped that.
So would you say it was almost like the 90s had to they had to go away for them to be missed in a weird way, right?
Absolutely.
And those fans of the 80s bands that were in their teens, they needed that decade to find themselves, get their job, get their degree. So like you said, then when the 2000s come along, they're in their 30s, right?
Sure, they're successful.
And they're like,
they know what they're doing in life.
Yeah.
They've got their thing.
That makes total sense.
But what's even funnier from playing in a cover band, and I watch this a lot, we cover all different kinds of music, but the 80s is where it's at. And even the young kids are just loving that music, and they know it because they grew up to it. Their parents playing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
My son's twitching right now.
Dad,
if I hear one more Poison song.
That music, and they grew up on it. They know the words to those songs. So even when we're playing the Poison and the Guns N' Roses and stuff, those kids are singing it word for word.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And it's great.
And you know
they were
what
raised right.
Yes, they were raised right.
You know
Absolutely.
What? And I think what's cool these days, I know the bands wouldn't think it's cool because they're used to playing the big stadiums. But I mean, now they're more in touch with their fans than they were back in the day.
Absolutely, man.
You couldn't get near Brett Michaels or Jesse James Dupree or any of them guys, and now we go to shows and sit down and have shots with them after the show.
Absolutely.
So as a fan of the 80s, that's like
the last time we saw Kix, and this was just a few months ago. Yeah. The lead singer, Steve Whiteman, spent, I would say, a third of the night really genuinely thanking the fans.
Oh, absolutely. The whole show.
And you could tell it was heartfelt. It was genuine. And they were happy, man. They were happy to be doing this at 70 or 68 or whatever age they are. And you're absolutely right, man. They got humbled, and then they got more appreciative.
Absolutely.
And now you're seeing, man, M3 Festival, Rocklahoma, all these cruises now that are happening, right? Every band now seems to have their own cruise, the Kiss cruise and the Motley cruise.
We should do one of those.
I know. I agree.
Bucket list.
I'm in.
bucket list. But
our wives aren't in,
M3
but we're in.
Festival, we've gone a billion times, and it's just 30, 40 hair bands all having a great time. And in between, some of them will be out or in the bar area or whatever. Everybody's happy to.
But what you got to realize is that era is also coming to an end because those guys are of the age now where they physically can't do it or they're dying.
Right.
And that's sad. That's going to be really sad for us. I mean, look at the people you've lost. Prince.
Right.
Oh, my God. Michael
what I mean?
Jackson.
Icon.
Right?
Those kind of guys are gone. I mean, their music lives on, but we can't go see them in concert anymore.
Well, and I said to my wife the other night, I'm like, 10 years from now, who are we going to go see live?
Yeah.
Right.
Who's going to be out there?
Oh, I watched the.
I hope Post Malone comes to Pittsburgh.
The good thing is there's really good tribute bands.
See, there's a lead in. I'm gonna tell you what.
Yes,
we're all big fans up here, of course, and we do a lot of that. I watched the iHeart Music Awards last night, and back in the '80s, my dad, being of the '60s, would look at the music shows and go, "I don't know anybody." Mm-hmm. Last night, I sat there and went, "I don't know anybody."
Oh my God.
Except for your favorite, Taylor Swift.
Yeah, it's terrible. Hey, speaking of buttholes. No, go ahead.
That's how that's changed, though, too. You figure with technology now, you don't have to listen to what the radio station plays because you can go to iHeartRadio and you can put the hair bands on and just listen to that kind of music.
Yes.
So you're not
Spotify.
not forced to
Thank
listen
goodness.
to radio and go, "Oh my God, I hate this song," and try to change the channel.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because you don't even really listen to radio anymore now.
No.
It's iHeartRadio or Apple
Spotify.
Radio, Spotify.
It's
with
I mean,
all those platforms.
Amazon Alexa, right? Every day I come home and say, I swear to God, she's like, "Hello, Steve. Would you like to hear Motley Crue today?" Because that's all I tell her to play, like the 80s stuff.
Mine just laughs at me.
Well, yeah.
Oh,
mine laughs at me, too, in the bathroom.
Oh my!
I don't want to talk about it. But yeah, so, I mean, I used to think for a while there that I thought it sucked that the album era is over, right? Like you couldn't wait to go to the record store and get that CD, get that cassette, and you listened to every song.
And you read the cover.
And you
read
read
the jacket.
right.
You looked at
the
it.
liner notes, the whole thing, and you read the
Yes.
lyrics and everything. And now it's just like, all that's gone.
The lyrics. For the first time that I heard "Every Rose Has Its Thorn,"
Right.
I thought it said "Every road has its stone."
Oh, nice.
True story.
I mean, they do.
I thought it said every toe
story.
has its corn.
I was
yes.
singing. No, I was singing it as a
Right back to
young
feet.
kid. I'm singing it, and my sister said, "What did you say?"
Well, you're an
And
idiot.
she like called me out on it, and I'm going, "How uncool was that?" When your older sister
that's
goes,
embarrassing.
What did you say?
Yeah. Every toe has its corn.
Every toe has its corn.
But
We're getting hate mail.
well, so the revival though. What I'm happy about is, and we talked about this last week, that what's crazy to me is I was kind of sharing some of the top 25 biggest grossing concert tours of 2022. And like 6 or 7 of them were bands from the 80s. Motley Crue,
Absolutely.
Stadium Tour did like, what did I say, $174 million last year. It's insane. Guns N' Roses, like $94 million. So Iron Maiden was in the top, I think just outside the top 25. Kiss, 70-some million, 80 million, whatever. It's crazy.
On their third final tour.
On their 19th final tour. But you can't. Somebody made a good point.
Love you, Gene.
Before that. So, by the way, why are you talking about Kiss on the 80s show? They came out in the 70s.
They did.
Shut up. But anyway, okay. So I think we've done a fairly good job of kind of, capsulize. What's the word?
Encapsulating.
Encapsulating. Thank you.
You're welcome. I had to Google it.
Ben just corrected me. I'm an English major, and he's not.
I dropped out of college the first day.
Yeah.
He Googled that when he pooped.
Yeah, he Googles it when he poops.
Yeah. Got to do something on the phone.
Anyway, so yeah, I think that was a nice way to kind of sum up the 80s thing. But I did have some questions that I wanted to ask you. We're going to try to do this rapid fire because we're already going on, what, an hour 15?
Yeah, we're at hour 10.
But
Hour 10.
they love us,
But they love us.
so they'll keep listening.
So let's try to go through this real quick. All right, I'm going to ask you guys your opinions on this. Again, we're talking to Greg Sell and Brian Baumgartner, 2 wild and crazy dudes, 2 brothers from another mother of mine, and just awesome dudes. Very well versed in 80s lore, especially hair bands. So I'm happy to have you guys here for this.
Coming to a bar near you soon.
Yes, I couldn't think of anybody to have up here and where we're talking about hair bands. So, but let me do this. All right. So, hey, by the way, this podcast, I say it all the time. Proudly sponsored by Apex Giant.
Apex Giant.
Apex Giant.
You're going to lose that sponsorship. It's an hour into the show.
Apex.
A great company.
Apex.
Makes some great products, including the famous minimalist wallet that everybody loves. It's awesome. Check it out. Check out the wallet and other awesome products they make. www.apexgiant.com.
Apex
Giant.
Awesome. All right. So let's continue. We're gonna move down here. All right. So what was the best album debut for hairband? Best album debut. Best first album from a hairband. Your opinions. Brian is looking off yonder to try to figure out
that's
the answer.
tough.
Oh, the band Tough? Is that who you said?
Yes, Tough.
You're
TUFM?
talking debut
Debut album.
album.
Enough.
First album that come out of a hairband.
Man.
Clock's ticking.
I'm going to go with GNR. I'm going to go with Appetite for Destruction.
You would classify them just still as a hairband?
I mean, like you said,
To me, they're rock and roll.
The
Yeah.
first one was kind of,
It
Appetite for
was-
Destruction.
it's-
They played that game.
It's glammy.
You know?
It's glammy.
But-
it has glam
But
tendencies.
look, let's not joke about this for sure. It was because it was the first album your parents would let you have
Yeah.
that had the F word in it.
Yeah.
So they dropped F bombs every second, so everybody wanted to listen. It was
It was a family-friendly
Yes.
F-bomb album.
what I like
Salty
to call
Dog.
Salty Dog.
Another great band
Yes.
that came out late in the
One
day.
Hit Wonder.
Man,
89, wasn't it?
yeah. If they had been 87,
And
they
that
would have been
album
huge. The album was
really
awesome.
good.
Yeah, Every Dog Has Its Day is the name of the album, and our first single off of it was a song called "Come Along." Bum, 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 bum,
Not to
bum,
be confused
bum,
with
bum,
Come
bum,
Alone.
bum, bum. Anyway, Salty Dog. That's a great answer.
That's mine.
Here's an interesting thing about them. They reformed in the late 90s, and they called themselves American Dog, and they have been putting out albums and touring ever since, and it sounds just like Salty Dog.
But it's not the same band members because there was a very bad breakup in that band.
Well, and I do
And they
believe,
hate each other.
Oh, yeah, and I do believe there might have even been a drug-related death in the band.
Probably.
Might have been the singer, I think. But anyway, check out American Dog on Spotify or wherever you get your streaming music because they're pretty badass.
Well,
man.
we're going
They're
to turn
a lot
this
of fun.
back to you, Steve. What's yours?
Well, listen, as far as debuts go, I mean, if you consider Wasp a hair band, which I don't, but pretty much everybody does, the consensus is they're like the heaviest hair band, but I don't think. But their debut album, I Want to Be Somebody, Love Machine, Sleeping in the Fire, Torture Never Stops, Tormentor, all of them great songs.
Absolutely.
Shock rock at its best, man. And that really was what turned me on in the very beginning to hair band music. Okay, who was the best singer? 80s hair band.
David Coverdale.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, come on, you can't really.
Vocal range.
What's that? What's the? I'm a lack of my name's popping in my head right now. The guy from Cream's Rake.
Oh, yeah, Jeff Tate.
Jeff
But
Tate.
would you consider them hair metal?
I hated that band.
I know, you
no,
still
but
do.
I mean vocally. I mean,
Yeah.
But I mean, he was a
Amazing 80s singer. Probably the best.
highly
Mahenko Matavec.
Steelheart's guy.
trained.
That guy's range is just stupid.
It's insane. And we saw them at
Yes,
M3, and the guy can still hit those freaking notes, man. It's nuts. He had to grab his nuts and arch all the way back to his head hitting the floor.
Back in the day, Don Dokken.
Don
Not so
Dokken,
much
amazing
now.
singer, right?
Absolutely.
Right? Coverdale. I don't know how you can dispute that. I mean, as
you
sure as
can't.
hell isn't Vince Neil or Stephen Pearcy.
Coverdale was bluesy. And,
Yeah, he had it all,
soulful,
man.
And Tawny Katane.
Yes,
He had it all.
Yeah, he did. He literally had it all.
and I even go if you want to go to the bluesy side of things, Jack Russell.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Really
that growly, very strong vocals back in the day.
Very, very good singer.
Yeah.
He really was.
Still is. Can't walk, but he still can.
No, but he
Yeah.
can still belt it out, man.
And by the way, real quick, because I forgot to mention him, Vixen. There, I mentioned him.
Oh, thank you.
Great 80s band.
Warlock.
Anyway, Warlock with Doro. Oh, I used to listen to her album a lot in the privacy of
whole
my
lot.
bathroom.
And Adam, Lita Ford.
Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, I hope Adam sees this video
Yeah, so
because
do
Brian is wearing a Lita Ford guitar pick necklace.
Just for you, Adam.
Just for you, Adam.
She was nice enough to give it to me. I don't know why she doesn't like
I don't know if you know that story, but
Yeah, I saw the podcast.
Who was the best musician from the 80s hair band era?
As far as well-rounded, or as far as
Whatever.
one instrument,
Whatever floats your boat. Whatever takes your beef bus to Tuna Town.
I have to go with.
No, you don't want that. Yeah.
Don't ask.
That's the
You'll
Jimmy
get the
Beam
story.
talking.
Yes.
I like the style of guitar playing from John Sykes.
Yes.
The Crying in the Rain solo, that kind of stuff to me. Les Paul Marshall is my forte of the genre that I like. But you got to look at the success of the guitar player that nobody likes, C.C. DeVille.
C.C. DeVille,
And everybody
right?
gives him shit, but one of the most successful and probably
Is Mick Mars in that discussion?
not for me.
Right.
Yeah, I
Great
agree.
guitar player.
Now, see, I was going to go CC just
Yeah.
because that's the style of guitar, like you know,
Yeah.
that
That's the
fast, really 80s sounds, you know.
epitome. That's the symbol.
Yeah,
that's-
absolutely.
Warren DeMartini,
Warren
Yeah,
DeMar-
oh my goodness.
Jakey Lee
Vivian
was
Campbell.
my guy. Vivian Campbell was good.
Tracy Guns,
Tracy Guns was good.
Slash.
Yes.
Steve Vai.
Steve Vai. Yeah.
I mean,
Damn.
they're all gunslingers.
What
Yeah.
about that guy? Oh, I mean, can
Tracy
we say?
Guns. If you say
Well, Randy
gunslinger.
Rhoads wasn't really hair band, so we can't include him.
He was just a genius, though.
Oh,
Musical genius.
Nobody said Lynch yet, huh?
I was never a big George Lynch fan.
I think technically, though, he was pretty
Probably.
amazing.
and he still is.
Still is.
Oh my goodness.
Another great band from the 80s that I forgot to mention. So I'm just going to be, listen, it's not Tourette's. I'm
It
just
is
going to be
Tourette's.
spouting out names because Striper, great band. Anyway, who's the most overrated hair band?
Overrated?
Overrated.
I'm going to get in trouble for saying this.
Go ahead.
Def Leppard.
Hands down. That was my answer. Def Leppard.
Sorry, Val.
I think that, I don't know. I
love 'em.
I got to give them props.
So
because
my arm back on me.
Oh my goodness, you went there.
In the name of love.
I will no longer be bringing Jim Beam. To
It's the
these-
Jimmy talking, man. So Brian and I
mail.
say Def Leppard. Who do you say, Greg? Overrated.
I don't know. I mean, for me, overrated. Def Leppard, I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
I see that. I see that from the pop side of things because they were kind of
Yeah.
They were right on that line
Oh,
of
that borderline.
hairband pop. You know,
Ben used to dance naked to Rocket
Used
when that
to?
song came out. Used to.
Used to?
You like Def Leppard, right?
I like all music, man.
Yeah, you do. What bands do you feel were unfairly lumped into the hair band category? Successful bands.
Guns N' Roses.
Guns N'
They're
Roses.
a rock
Absolutely.
band to me. They're not a hair band.
I would my answer is Cinderella.
They're bluesy.
Bluesy, rock oriented. They didn't have too much hair influences in their sound.
Faster Pussycat too. It's
Bluesy,
more of a bluesy rock,
gutter,
sleaze rock. you know.
LA Guns.
Great White.
Yeah.
Great White, yeah. Yeah.
Only with Jack Russell. No other Great White.
All right. Yeah, not the other band. By the
the
way,
other
how
one.
do you guys feel about that crap too? About bands that have two versions of the band.
I feel that if you're the original lead singer, the original guitar player, that you should have the right to call
Yes.
yourself that. If you're the drummer, then you should call it such and such, formerly of.
You mean like Steve Riley's LA Guns?
Yes. And they're not bad. I mean,
No,
we heard them.
no, but they're not LA
bad,
Guns.
But they're not. It's hard to replace the voice of a band.
Yeah.
Well, and right now, for example, in just a few weeks in our area, Skid Row and Warrant coming, right?
Sure.
And a lot of people are excited about that. But
cool.
no Sebastian Bach, no Janie Lane for obvious reasons. Janie Lane can't make it.
No,
But,
he's
But
he's
Roberts,
tied up.
you know,
Killer, Eric Cromwell's
Right.
great singer.
Yeah.
so and I hear the new guy's great,
He's
but
good.
but is it Skid Row without Sebastian Bach? Is it Warrant without Janie Lane? Is it just band members with a karaoke guy? I mean,
I mean,
How do you feel?
You can have good vocalists and still enjoy the music in the show, but I mean, the whole time you're going, man, I wish Sebastian Bach was up there.
I think what it boils down to is as long as those guys don't try to be those people and they're themselves and they entertain the crowd, then I'm cool with it.
How do you feel about 80s bands who are touring now using backing tracks?
Absolutely hate it.
I'm going to go the other way.
Yeah?
I don't mind it because, I mean, if you can't do it, then, we're there to see the show. We're there to hear our youth. So, I mean, they've been doing it for a long time. I mean, I've seen, everybody knows Don Dawkins right now, God love him, but I wish he'd used backing tracks on the last time I seen him because
I wish they would replace him with one of the young guys.
Because I'm going, man,
I wouldn't mind that band having a karaoke guy.
Yes, please. I mean, yeah.
Well, Brian, you
Where's
and
Vinnie
Ben,
Pearl?
congratulations. You're on the same page. We mentioned this before.
You're talking about people that can do or have done it, and now they still want to be out there. Maybe they can't perform to the same level that their fans expect, and they want to be out there performing. I wouldn't enjoy it, but I can't blame them for still trying to get out there. I mean, they've been doing it their whole lives. They can do it, or they have done it, and now they want to still be out there. Give them one more round. Why not?
The problem I have with that, it's like they're destroying their legacy. Like they just can't. They can't get there. Like I saw David Lee Roth the other day, and it was absolutely
terrible,
horrible.
Yeah, like I said, I wouldn't enjoy it. I'm not going to knock a guy who's already done it, who's just trying to make one more round for his fans, or I guess it depends on what the reason is. If they're out there just for another money grab and it's obvious, then that's different. But
well, let's call this 50-50 because I'm with you, Greg, on this 100%. I get really, really PO'd when I hear, like, you guys know, obviously, my favorite band is Wasp. And their tour was amazing. Brian, you and I saw their last tour.
Absolutely amazing.
But it was clearly evident that they were using backing tracks. Blackie's, like, literally in his 70s, and he can't hit those notes anymore. And when it got so obvious that's what was happening, it distracted me from the performance.
The thing about it is he puts that big thing in front of him so you can't see his lips.
And there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, so you can't see it.
That's not cool.
And
you just summed up my sex life.
Yeah.
Smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors.
You put something in front of you so you can't see.
We call it Wizard of Oz style. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtains. Wait a minute. Sorry. Left field. My fault.
Glory hole.
Speaking of Steel Panther.
Speaking of Taylor Swift.
Oh, my goodness. Here she
Anyway.
goes.
TSBH.
So, yeah. I mean, the backing track thing bothers the crap out of me.
The backing track, another big pet peeve that I have, I shouldn't even say this because I'm going to get myself in trouble, but when people read lyrics at a live show.
Yeah. I agree with that too. I agree with that. I have a real problem with.
You're getting paid to perform, and people want to see you
Vince
play
Neil.
live.
Excuse me.
And I mean, if you don't know your own songs, by then, even on a cover band level.
Oh yeah.
There's no interaction with the crowd because people stand there and they read.
This is a
lyrics,
personal thing.
It's always been a pet peeve with me for a while. In fact,
for a
I'll walk
long, long
out.
time.
I won't.
Yeah, I
I go
agree
out
with
to see
that.
a band. I'll leave. I
agree with that.
I don't
And they're
agree with
saying
that.
on all accounts that Vince Neil's doing that on this tour, which is funny, on the new tour, that they sound the worst they've ever sounded. But they got the new guitar player, John Five, who's just not, I mean, he's good, but he's not Motley Crue. And Vince Neil's singing every third word, and he's using a teleprompter. It's embarrassing. And they're using backing tracks on top of all that.
All
and
of the
doesn't he
above
have
Motley
like two
Crue.
smoking hot backup singers too that are singing all the hard parts?
That's a distraction.
Yeah. But it's the whole point
Works
is
for
for
me.
me, I totally get what Ben's saying, and I totally get what Brian's saying. Like, I'm a huge fan of I want to see them one more time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they can't do it anymore, and if they need to rely on freaking studio tricks to do it, then why the hell are they still doing it? And I think that goes into the question of you saying it destroys their legacy. I don't want to remember being the last time I see Wasp going, man, they use backing tracks.
I could see that. That's a valid point.
Yeah, and that's that's what I say. People go, oh man, did you see Wasp? How was it? And I went backing tracks. I mean, that's the first thing I said. It looked great. Blackie sounded, the
backing track was
they played
very
10
good.
songs, and Brian, am I right? Yeah. Exact same as the record.
No, if you closed your eyes, you were listening.
studio.
Last time I saw Whitesnake, they were tuned down so far so he could.
Yeah, he can't sing anymore.
Right. And the bass player sang majority of the songs because Coverdale, who's one of the greatest rock singers of all time,
can't do it anymore.
He just couldn't do it anymore. So to me, it's like And he finally did this tour. He's like, he backed out. I can't do it.
You can't do it. He came to his realization.
It's not nothing against him. It has to hurt because that was his life.
It's like
it's
like the football player if it turns 40 and he can't do it anymore.
Yes.
You know, it's like they don't want to give up the game, but it's like, dude, you don't have it anymore. A couple more questions here. Who's your all-time favorite hair band overall? You're on a desert island. You can only listen to one hair band over and over and over again. I mean, you can have
that sounds awful to me.
That's terrible.
Who am I on the island with?
Just by yourself.
Damn it.
And all of a sudden, a case of lotion comes up on the shore.
Thank God. I'm gonna catch hell for this too, but I gotta say Poison.
Poison? Their entire catalog?
I've seen them more than any other band in concert, and it's always a good time. It's always a good show, and the energy's always high, and it's just everybody has fun. And
Brian?
Well, I guess I can't say it if I ain't wearing the shirt. Faster Pussycat.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, they sounded great last year, man.
They sound good. It's a little bit off. It was always either you liked them or you didn't like them, or you never heard of them.
Right.
You know, back in the day, because you was listening to the really glammy stuff. But I mean, still today, just kicking every show they can and sounding
real
really
quick,
good.
let's talk about. So last summer we saw it was Faster Pussycat, LA Guns, and Tom Kiefer's Cinderella. An amazing show, and one of the things that we found out during the show was the lead singer, Faster Pussycat, and the lead singer for LA Guns both come out and say during their respective shows that they're clean and sober, and both bands put on an amazing. I mean, they were great. They sounded great. They probably, other than Faster Pussycat, I think the lead's Tammy Down. He's the only. I think he's the only original member left, right?
The drummer,
but the band's he's the drummer.
Yeah.
And then with LA Guns, it's just Tracy and Phil, right? Sounded great though.
I love Phil's new look, by the way.
Right, yeah.
I'm so glad he shaved off that porn star.
Oh my God!
Oh no, he still had it,
but
it's gone now. He shaved it.
Oh, thank goodness.
But Brian, we saw Faster Pussycat in a dive bar at least 10 years ago.
Yes, sir.
And this was when apparently the lead singer of Faster Pussycat was on a heroin binge.
Yes.
And he was out of control, and he looked like death, man.
Yes,
and
he really
smelled like death, and it was bad. And then
It's true.
We saw them years later, and we were like, "Oh my God, I can only imagine how bad he is now." But he was great. He was running around the stage. He had confidence again. He could sing again.
No,
it was
really,
great.
absolutely.
So bands are getting clean and sober. And Tom Kiefer,
Oh my God,
put on a hell of a show.
Remember, we were going to leave.
Yeah,
we were going to leave.
Like,
we
saw Faster in L.A. Let's leave. And
it's
then
gonna sound
Kiefer
bad.
comes out with a band that I'd never heard of any of them of the players. They rocked it, man.
Dropped to his knees and belted out stuff we ain't heard in years. So
And real quick,
we stayed.
We were lucky to get front row for that one.
Yes, we were.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
In a walking boot.
And your injury.
And the wheelchair.
Don't give away our secrets.
Okay.
We're not going to tell
I'm just going to
stories.
say
I heard a
because I
rumor.
know you think less
I
of
heard
me.
a rumor. I heard a rumor that the walking boot went on in the church parking lot.
Yes,
Yes.
it did.
Yeah, we
Tell the story now, it's over.
perfected the deception in the parking lot of a church with a glowing neon cross looking
Yes,
down at us.
yes. In a town full of churches.
So apparently, I found out that
Every corner.
if I was in a wheelchair, I could get front row,
Yes,
and Brian could get front row because he was my quote unquote handler.
that's right.
You
And
might as well say it now. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned.
I want to
because
apologize.
You are going to hell for that one.
I want to apologize. And it was great because when in the bathroom line, they let me go first, and the beer line, they let me go first. And then the guy behind me, they kept throwing picks, and I couldn't stand up to catch them. The guy kept giving them to me because he felt bad for me.
Hey, you know what? It was a straight up. We should have made an '80s movie because
Oh my God.
it was like a movie night.
We should have filmed it. It was great.
Yeah, it would have been great.
And then there was one point where we were rushing back down because LA Guns had started, and Brian was pushing me way too fast
Yes.
down the damn aisle.
You should have dumped him.
I know.
I let him go a few
Like,
times.
whoa,
for fun.
whoa. And meanwhile, we were both power drinking. The
Oh, yeah.
handler, I'm wheelchair bound, and my handler's getting intoxicated.
I am a poor handler.
It was not a good scene. Anyway, but it was a
was a
good show.
fantastic
Just so I'm listening, so everybody understands, you were not injured Like,
Oh, I was.
He
No.
was so injured.
Oh, totally fake.
Being
totally
ugly.
fake.
No.
being ugly is not a handicap. They put you in a wheelchair to get a front row seat.
Yeah.
My feelings got injured that day.
If we're going to tell the story, let's make it really fast. I'll make it very quick. He calls me on the phone. He says, "Hey, look, they got 2 front row seats left." I'm like, "Cool, get them." Click. 5 seconds later, phone rings again. "Steve, I bought the tickets. We got a problem." So what's the problem? He's, "One of them's handicapped." And that's how it led into this whole thing.
Well, the woman, I called the Greensburg Palace, the Palace Theater,
Palace Theater, you rock.
and she says, "Oh wait, maybe I shouldn't have said the name
You
of the
probably
place."
should have said it. Now we can never
Can
do
we
it
edit
again.
that? I know.
We would never do it again.
But she says to me, "Sir," she goes, "I can only sell these tickets to you if one of you is in a wheelchair." And then she literally goes, "Wink, wink, nudge, nudge." She goes, "So I have to ask you over the phone, are you in a wheelchair?" And I went,
Yes, ma'am.
"Yes."
Wait.
So I got the
Yes.
tickets. So she nudged me. She encouraged me. She's the sinner, not me.
Whoever you are, lady.
All right.
That
so
poor
anyway,
guy's
thank you, lady.
still standing. He's probably still outside of the palace in his wheelchair because you took his seat. And he's crushed, and is never ever going to see those bands again.
But you know what? To Steve's character, he wouldn't stand up at the end and go, "Yeah, I tried," but he wouldn't
Brian,
do it.
listen, right when the lights came up, Brian, it's a dude, jump up and start jumping, running up and down the aisle and stuff and cheering. And it would have been hilarious, but
Throw
I
the
couldn't do
boat
it.
on-
I didn't
on
have it in me. I couldn't be deceptive like that, you know.
No.
All right, guys,
That's
we're down
terrible.
to the last question, and this is a big one, and this is it, right?
All right.
We're waiting for the big one, as Femme Fatale once sang in the 80s, right? So here we go. Mount Rushmore of hair, 4 bands.
Oh God.
You've heard of the thrash 4, right? What's it? The
Yes.
big 4: Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax, right? Who's the big 4 in hair,
Poison.
right?
I'm going to say.
You got to say Crew, right?
You got to say
Yeah,
Crew.
you gotta
Poison
be
Crew. I got to say Whitesnake. I loved
Yeah?
Whitesnake. They were huge.
Yeah,
And
they
you gotta
were.
throw Def
That
Leppard
one
in there.
album alone was ridiculous. Sold like 10 million or something like that. It was insane, and it was staying power was
the
ridiculous.
videos.
Yeah, it
Tawny
was
Katane,
Tawny
man.
Katane.
I mean, that's just
I had a
every stripper's song ever. From
I had
that
a
era.
lot of friction in back in my day with Tawny Katane.
I mean, you could say
lot of motion,
Not emotion.
a lot of low in motion.
Poison, Slaughter, Trickster, Firehouse. You know, right out. Oh, even though, and there weren't 2 huge bands, but
Right.
in that era, they were big.
Okay, so we're saying right now, Poison, Motley Crue. We agree on Whitesnake. Who's the
Yes.
4th band?
Def Leppard.
You got to say Def Leppard.
You got to.
huge.
Just
With
based
staying
on their
power
popularity
till
alone.
now. I mean,
Hysteria sold over 20 million copies. I mean, you can't deny the fact that they got to be on Mount Rushmore, no matter how much it pains me to say it, because I hate those guys. But I
That's
really
only 'cause
hate them
you
with a
played
passion.
them
I
a
loved old Def
million
Leppard,
times.
but my God, Hysteria on. Seriously, the drummer loses an arm, the band lost their soul. That's all I'm saying. So,
wow.
well,
Says a
and with
man
that-
who took a
at
seat
Steve
from a guy
Barrett.
in a wheelchair.
Yes.
So my
You've
name
done
is Ben
circles.
McMillan. So if you want to complain about me,
At Ben.
at Ben. But listen, seriously, we talked way too long. But my
Yeah, we
God,
did.
we could talk another 2 hours. In
could.
fact, we probably will after this is over.
It would probably.
But guys, I want to thank you once again, my guest, Brian Baumgartner, Greg Sell, 80s gods, in my opinion, two brothers from another mother. Ben, not an 80s god, but still another brother from another mother.
And
We don't
would
judge.
also like to thank Steve's sponsor.
Yes.
Apex Giant. Apex Giant, they make some great stuff. Go to www.apexgiant.com. I'm Steve Barrett, Ben McMillan, Greg Sell, Brian Baumgartner. Thank you. Talk 80s to me. We'll see you next time.
Rocky Brothers.
See y'all. Thanks, Steve.
Welcome. Oh, we didn't even get to the truth or dare.
Truth or dare. I knew you was going to do it. That's right. We can put on another hour. I know you're going to do any more shows like that. I'm going to bring a pad. That's what I said. I'm going to bring one of those pads, one of the donuts that you blow up.
We're not recording it, but let me ask you this. True or false? See if you can answer. What the fuck is is it?
Yep.
Never mind. I can't find it. Are you serious? I didn't bring it? This really pisses me off.
A lot of notes.
I know. Hey, I did a lot of research. I didn't want to forget it.
Is there a sponsor?
Huh?
Is there a sponsor in there somewhere?
No.